When the Oak Ridge Heights HOA fenced off my beloved community garden on a technicality, they thought they'd won. What they didn't expect was for me to discover, and secretly purchase, the forgotten property containing the only access gate. Sometimes the sweetest revenge comes with a deed and a new padlock. Before watching full video, comment below from where you watching. Also like and subscribe for more stories. For 5 years, I poured my heart into that community garden. What started as a small patch of tomatoes had blossomed into a thriving half-acre of organic vegetables that supplied not only my family but several neighbors and the local food bank. I never imagined my gardening hobby would turn into a war with the Oak Ridge Heights Homeowners Association, or that I'd eventually own the very property they used against me. It all began on a crisp March morning. I was preparing the soil for spring planting when I noticed a surveyor marking boundaries near my garden plot. Curious, I wandered over. "Just routine work," he said with a practiced smile. "The HOA is updating property lines." I thought nothing of it until 2 weeks later when the letter arrived. In cold, formal language, the Oak Ridge Heights HOA informed me that my garden was partially encroaching on common area property. I had 30 days to remove all plants and structures or face fines of $100 per day. The letter hit me like a physical blow. I'd specifically checked with the previous HOA board before expanding my garden 3 years ago. They had not only approved but encouraged the community garden concept. I had emails and written permission. Yet here was the new board, led by President Eleanor Winters, claiming I was in violation of boundaries I'd carefully respected. I scheduled a meeting with the board immediately. "I have documentation proving permission was granted," I explained, sliding the folder across the conference table in the community center. Eleanor barely glanced at it. "Previous boards may have made errors in judgment. The current survey shows clear encroachment. Rules are rules, Mr. Chin." "This garden feeds families," I argued. "We donate over 200 pounds of produce to the food bank monthly during harvest season." "Commendable," said Eleanor without an ounce of sincerity, "but irrelevant to property boundaries." I tried reason. I tried appealing to community spirit. I even offered to pay a nominal lease for the land. Eleanor and her board rejected everything. Their minds were made up. As I left the meeting, Vice President Richard Hoffman pulled me aside. "Between us," he whispered, "Eleanor's gunning for your garden because it blocks the view from her new patio. But there's something else you should know. The access road to your garden? It crosses through Lot 47, the vacant property at the corner. The only legal access is through the gate on that lot." This was news to me. "But that gate's been unlocked for years. Everyone uses it to reach the community center." Richard nodded grimly. "Eleanor convinced the board to install a new lock last week. Notice how the key wasn't provided in your letter." I felt a cold certainty settle in my stomach. This wasn't about property lines. This was a deliberate strategy to kill my garden by cutting off access. The next day, sure enough, a heavy chain and padlock adorned the gate I'd used for years. A small sign read, "Authorized access only, contact HOA for permission." I called Eleanor immediately. "I need access to tend my garden during the removal period," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "Of course," she replied with artificial sweetness. "The gate will be unlocked on Saturdays from 10 a.m. to noon for the next 4 weekends. That should be sufficient for your needs." 4 hours total to dismantle 5 years of work. It was insulting and impossible. Even worse, without regular watering, my early seedlings would die within days. That evening I paced my kitchen, fuming. My wife Sarah watched with concern. "There has to be something we can do," she said. "What about that property Richard mentioned, Lot 47? Who owns it?" I paused mid-stride. I have no idea. It's been vacant since we moved here." A quick property record search revealed that Lot 47 belonged to Oak Ridge Development LLC, the original builder of our subdivision. After completing the neighborhood 10 years ago, they'd apparently forgotten about this odd corner lot with no street frontage. The property taxes were current, but the company itself had been dormant for years. An idea began forming. "Sarah, what if we bought that lot? We'd control the gate access." She looked skeptical. "Can we afford it? And would they even sell to us?" I spent the next day researching. Oak Ridge Development had been acquired by a larger company that had no interest in a small, oddly shaped lot in a completed development. The county assessed its value at just $15,000. Surprisingly affordable because it was considered landlocked with no street access. I made a call to the company's asset management department. "Lot 47 in Oak Ridge Heights? Let me check." There was a lengthy pause. "Yes, we still own that. It's on our disposal list, actually. Not much use to anyone except the HOA. I'd like to make an offer, I said, heart racing. The representative sounded surprised. Really? Well, I suppose, we've been trying to clear these orphan properties. Make me an offer and I'll run it up the chain. I offered $17,000, slightly above assessed value. It would drain our savings, but I considered it an investment in justice. 3 days later they accepted. The representative seemed puzzled by my interest but was happy to unload the property. We closed the deal with remarkable speed, as cash offers for low-value lots don't face the same hurdles as home purchases. The entire time, I told no one except Sarah what I was doing. I continued attending the HOA's grudging Saturday access periods, removing a few plants each time while secretly watering the rest. Eleanor watched with evident satisfaction as I loaded tomato cages into my truck. Making good progress, I see. Remember, everything must be cleared by the deadline. I just smiled and nodded. The property deed for Lot 47 had been recorded that morning. The day after receiving my recorded deed, I arrived at the gate with my own heavy-duty padlock. I removed the HOA's lock, replaced it with mine, and posted a new sign, "Private property, access by permission only." Then I called an emergency HOA board meeting. When I walked into the community center that evening, Eleanor's face showed annoyed impatience. "Mr. Chin, the board is very busy. If this is another appeal about your garden—" "It's not about my garden," I interrupted, placing the property deed on the table. "It's about Lot 47, which I now own." The silence was deafening. Richard couldn't suppress a smile. "That's impossible," Eleanor finally sputtered. "It's done," I replied calmly. "The property with the only access gate to the community center and my garden now belongs to me. I've changed the lock." The implications slowly dawned on the board members. Eleanor's face flushed deep red. "You can't block access to the community center. That's exactly what you tried to do to my garden," I finished for her. "However, unlike you, I'm willing to be reasonable. I'll grant an easement for community center access on 2 conditions. The board members leaned forward nervously. "First, my garden stays with a proper written agreement this time. Second, Eleanor resigns from the board, effective immediately." The uproar was immediate. Eleanor shouted about blackmail and threatened lawsuits. I waited until the noise subsided. "I've consulted an attorney," I said. "The HOA has no legal right-of-way through my property. You could try establishing one through adverse possession, but that would take years of litigation. Meanwhile, the community center remains inaccessible except through my gate." Richard cleared his throat. "He's right, Eleanor. We have no alternative access without major construction." The debate raged for 2 hours. Other board members began questioning Eleanor's handling of the entire situation. Eventually, practical considerations prevailed. The board voted 4-2 to accept my terms, with Eleanor and her closest ally dissenting. Eleanor stormed out, but not before hissing, "This isn't over, Chin." She was right. It wasn't over, it was just beginning. The following week brought a certified letter from Eleanor's attorney, claiming various violations and demanding restoration of HOA access. My attorney responded by noting that the HOA had no recorded easement and that any presumed right-of-way had been permissive, not prescriptive. We offered a reasonable access agreement, contingent on garden approval and Eleanor's resignation. The next HOA meeting saw record attendance as neighbors learned about the standoff. I presented my case calmly, showing documentation of the previous board's approval and explaining how Eleanor had targeted the garden for personal reasons. "I don't want to restrict community center access," I emphasized. "I just want my garden to continue serving the community and reasonable people on the board." The tide of opinion turned dramatically. Several neighbors spoke about vegetables they'd received from my garden. The food bank director described how our donations helped families in need. By meeting's end, residents were demanding Eleanor's resignation regardless of the access issue. Facing community pressure and legal reality, Eleanor resigned the following day. The new board, now led by Richard, quickly approved a formal agreement. My garden would stay with clear boundaries and the HOA would have an official access easement through Lot 47, maintained at their expense. But the story didn't end there. With Eleanor gone, interest in community gardening flourished. Neighbors asked if they could start plots of their own. The new board allocated additional common area for expanded gardens. Within a year, we had transformed the entire half-acre into the Oak Ridge Heights Community Garden, with 20 families tending plots. We installed rainwater collection systems and built a tool shed with donated materials. The food bank received triple the produce we'd previously provided. Even Eleanor eventually came around. I spotted her watching from a distance one Saturday as children learned to plant seedlings. I walked over with a basket of freshly picked strawberries. "Peace offering," I said, extending the basket. "There's a vacant plot available if you're interested." She didn't take the strawberries, but her rigid posture softened slightly. "You've done good work here," she admitted reluctantly. "Though your methods were unorthodox. Sometimes you need to own the gate to open it for everyone," I replied. 6 months later, Eleanor started a small herb garden in the community plot. We never became friends, but we developed a respectful coexistence based on shared work in the soil. As for Lot 47, I eventually donated it to a community land trust with permanent easements for both the garden and community center. No future board could ever restrict access again. What began as a battle over boundaries became something far more valuable. A lesson in standing firm for what matters, finding creative solutions to seemingly impossible problems, and ultimately, growing community along with crops. Sometimes the fruits of conflict, when tended properly, yield the sweetest harvest of all. Every time I unlock that gate now, the same gate once used to block me, I'm reminded that ownership isn't always about possession. Sometimes it's about ensuring access for all. My name may be on that deed, but the garden belongs to everyone who nurtures it, just as the food we grow belongs to everyone who hungers. That's a harvest worth fighting for.